All right, Dad. I'm going to proceed now with Ted Williams, part 4. And remember, the last thing I read was when he came back from Korea and got in the batting cage and just kept hitting home runs. And then it said, the one thing everyone agreed on was that on this last pitch, Williams rocketed a long home run over the right field wall. At that point, he stepped out of the cage, flipped the bat to the ground, and walked off while everyone around him watched in awe. His hands were bleeding. Chapter 4, Maestros of the Keyboard. Ted Williams hated sports writers. There's no other word for it. He hated them, and as his daughter Claudia said, hated them till the day he died. Williams also read every single thing ever written about him. And this reminds me of Barry Bonds, Dad, because I think I told you when I was, as a side note, when I was reading the Barry Bonds one, that in the, not the earliest days of the internet, but relatively early, Barry Bonds got a really fancy computer and set up a system so he could anonymously read and comment on what people were saying about him in internet chats. And so he, like Williams, he was, pretended not to be interested, but was very interested. Williams also read every single thing ever written about him. He used to have the Boston newspapers delivered to him every game day, so he could read them before he went on the field. On the road, he would have people back in Boston read him what the writers wrote. Now, how do you square that? How do you make sense of it? The safest answer is you don't make sense of Ted Williams. That is part of his legend, the mystery of him and all of his contradictions. On the one hand, he was, as a friend said, politically to the right of Attila the Hun. He worked hard all of his life to hide his Mexican heritage. His mother was Mexican, as was the uncle who helped teach him the game. Beyond that, he was just about the least politically correct person on earth. But when he was elected to the Hall of Fame, he put something in his speech about the shameful absence of Negro League stars like Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. He was asked by the Hall to cut that part out. There was no reason to ruffle feathers on this celebratory day. Needless to say, Williams did not cut that part out. Baseball, he said that day in Cooperstown, gives every American boy a chance to excel. Not just to be as good as someone else, but to be better than someone else. This is the nature of man and the name of the game, and I've always been a very lucky guy to have worn a baseball uniform, to have struck out, or to have hit a tape measure home run. And I hope someday the names of Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson in some ways can be added as a symbol of the great Negro players that are not here only because they were not given a chance. It should be noted, nobody applauded when Williams said that. It was 1966 and America was on fire, but within a few years, Paige and Gibson were in the Hall of Fame. He was largely an absentee father whose constant flare-ups of rage convinced his first daughter, Bobby Jo, that he was mentally ill. My dad was sick, she told Bradley. It is a damn shame that because he was Ted Williams and because nobody wanted to tell him like it was, including myself, he suffered and became progressively more ill by the years. He was also a man who raised millions and millions of dollars for children with cancer through the Jimmy Fund and would personally and very privately visit hospitals and dedicate the best parts of himself. The announcer Dick Enberg remembered Williams visiting one little boy who grabbed hold of Ted's finger and wouldn't let go. So Williams asked the hospital to bring over a cot and he laid down until the boy fell asleep. There were a lot of stories like that. Sports writers saw these acts of generosity, and some of them, probably most of them, wanted to write about it. They wanted to tell about this side of Williams. He threatened them against it. He would say that if anybody wrote about his hospital visits, he would stop coming. And who wanted to be the one who pushed Ted Williams to stop visiting hospitals? Nobody. The story stayed in the notebook, and Williams kept his war against sports writers intact. There's another way to square Williams' feelings, and that is to say, he needed the sports writers. He needed the fuel of their criticisms. He needed their insults, their scolding, their cheap shots, their nitpicking in order to summon up the anger necessary to be brilliant. And again, I think that's quite a bit like Bonds. When Williams was young, he used to say that as soon as he made enough money, he was going to quit baseball and go fishing for the rest of his life. And even if he didn't mean that, he did need something to propel him forward after he had become a star. Fury worked. What did it matter if the vast majority of the words written about Ted Williams were glowing? Those words did nothing for him. It was the bile, most often written by his arch-nemesis Dave Egan, the Colonel, that spurred him on. Egan, the Colonel, was a small man physically, but like Williams, he was a huge personality. He was a Harvard-educated lawyer, a gifted writer, a ferocious fighter for baseball integration, and an alcoholic who was often too drunk to write his own columns. He was also on the take from any organization that could line his pockets. He didn't like Ted Williams at all. He called Williams T. Williams Esquire and wrote repeatedly that he was a bad influence on the youth of America. He tried to run Williams out of Boston. He wrote that Williams choked in the clutch. He tore Williams apart for only caring about himself and his own statistics. "I am on the record stating the Red Sox," he wrote, "will never win the pennant so long as T. Williams Esquire is around to throw sand and monkey wrenches into the gears and machinery." There were other writers like Egan who tore at Williams, though not quite with the same glee. There were still more who insisted on seeing the worst in the kid. You already know that Williams lost the MVP award when he hit 400. Well, he also lost it when winning the Triple Crown twice. The first time in 1942, he led the league in average, homers, and RBIs, and he lost the MVP to Yankee second baseman Joe Gordon, which no doubt made you happy, Dad. The second Triple Crown in 1947, he lost it again to his arch-rival DiMaggio, who by the numbers didn't do anything as well as Williams had that season. "I always hit best angry," Williams conceded, and so he powered through it all. Each slight, each insult meant more hardline drives. Williams led the league in on-base percentage and slugging and ops plus, remember that's on-base percentage plus slugging, every full year he played from 1941 to 1951. He won 2 more batting titles after he came back from Korea, and in 1957, at age 38, he hit .388 and posted a 1.257 ops, the second highest of his career, and that's stratospheric, Dad. That's like Barry Bonds and Babe Ruth territory, as you might expect. That year, he finished 5 hits shy of hitting exactly 400. He said, "As long as I live, I'll make them eat crow every chance I get," Claudia said. Chapter 5, Bid Kid Adieu. Even a fleet of sports writers wasn't enough to feed Williams' insatiable need to boil. It's funny, people talked about his incredible eyesight, measured at 20/15 when he was in the service, but it was actually his hearing that was supernatural. Ted Williams could hear a single boo in a Fenway Park filled with cheers. Those boos terrorized him all his career. He spit at fans more than once. He supposedly tried to hit a couple with foul balls. When he met odd young fans, he would sometimes say, "You're not one of those booers, are you?" He never blamed fans for watching him, Kramer wrote. His hate was for those who couldn't or wouldn't feel with him his effort, his exultation, pride, rage, or sorrow. Especially rage. Williams might have been the greatest hitter ever. He also might have been the greatest fisherman ever. He's in 2 fishing halls of fame. But everyone who knew him will tell you he definitely was the greatest swearer ever. Nobody, it seems, could spew blasphemy in the sort of poetic burst quite like Williams. He was the Ella Fitzgerald of profanity. In any case, at some point, very early in his career, Williams decided that if fans were going to boo him, he would never, ever tip his cap to them. It was an oath that made sense to him, and he kept it his entire career. He hit more than 500 home runs, and he might have approached 700 had he not gone to war twice. His .482 lifetime on-base percentage, .482, that's insane. His .482 lifetime on-base percentage is the all-time record. He had a 1.045 ops I'm sorry, I said ops plus. Ops is the one that's on base percentage plus slugging. As a 20-year-old kid full of vinegar, and a 1.096 ops as a 41-year-old with a bad neck and legs that ached all the time. All that time, the fans, almost all of them, cheered like mad, but he still heard the boos and he never tipped his cap. Which brings us to the last game. It was September 28th, 1960. Williams had turned 42 a month earlier. He had one last season in the sun after a dismal and injury-plagued 59 season. That season was so bad that Yawkey asked him to retire, but Williams refused to go out like that, so he took a $35,000 pay cut and came back and hit .316 with 29 home runs and only 390 plate appearances. And that's a little bit like Bonds, too, because his last year he was quite good, and they just wouldn't rehire him. And on that last day, 10,454 Dreamers came out to Fenway Park for one last look. It was a dreary day, cold, damp, a brisk wind blew in from right field. John Updike was among those who had come to see if maybe, just maybe, the kid could hit one more home run. Williams knew that. He tried. He hit 2 long fly balls, the second of which he believed was as hard as he could hit a ball. Both died on the warning track. Then came the last at bat. Baltimore's Jack Fisher was on the mound. His first pitch was a ball. His second pitch was a fastball over the middle of the plate, and Williams swung through it, almost falling to the ground in the follow-through. Williams knew that Fisher would challenge him with another fastball after that. Fisher did. He threw one more fastball, and Williams connected, and the ball soared to right field. From my angle behind third base, Updike wrote, the ball seemed less an object in flight than the tip of a tower, motionless construct like the Eiffel Tower, the Tappan Zee Bridge. It was in the books while it was in the sky. The ball sailed out, home run 521, and Williams ran the bases his usual way, head down, quick as he could. As if our praise were a storm of rain to get out of, Updike wrote. Well, that's a great sentence. As if our praise were a storm of rain to get out of. And then Williams went to the bench. The fans called to him. Teammates pushed him. The umpire asked him to come out. Fisher even paused on the mound to give Williams a chance to take a curtain call, but he stayed out of sight. Then Red Sox manager Pinky Higgins tried to trick Williams into saying goodbye. He sent Williams out to left field for the top of the ninth, and then, before the inning actually began, sent Carroll Hardy out there to replace him. His hope was that Williams would hear the cheers. Even he would not have been able to hear a boo in that crowd, and just tip his cap on the way back to the dugout. Our noise for some seconds passed beyond excitement into a kind of immense open anguish, a wailing, a cry to be saved, Updike wrote, but immortality is non-transferable. Ted Williams did not tip his cap. He'd made a promise to himself years before, and he did not break promises to himself. He disappeared into the dugout for good. Gods, Updike wrote, do not answer letters. Epilogue. In 1999, Ted Williams rode to home plate in a golf cart for the All-Star game at Fenway Park. He had suffered 2 strokes and a broken hip in the previous month, but still he stood. The greatest living ball players, from Henry Aaron to Willie Mays, Bob Feller to Stan Musial, Ken Griffey to Cal Ripken Jr., and all the All-Stars of the day surrounded him and hugged him. He tipped his cap, and the crowd cheered as loudly as they ever had, and as the paper said, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. "Hey, McGuire," Williams shouted out to Mark McGuire, the most prodigious slugger in the world then. "You ever smell the wood when you foul one off real hard? You ever notice how it smells like burning wood?" "I've smelled it," McGuire said. Maybe he had, or maybe he was just saying that, but Ted Williams smiled and nodded and said it was the best bleeping smell in the whole world. There you go, Dad. Love you.